Alright, welcome. Hello, family. So, I know it's me playing or laying down with Zoxus, just hanging out. Alright, you're probably gonna hear Maya in the background because we're recording this in the little room. But, this is the capstone video on historic art, essentially. All the stuff that I learned, all the things that I learned over I think it was like a past month. This was like mainly all in January that I researched all this. I'll link all the stuff that I researched with, which are mainly lectures by Travis Lee Clark, PhD from the Utah Valley, and Professor Neal's Neolithic and Paleolithic art videos. So I'll link those. I think it's like 4 videos, about 5 hours worth of lectures, and then there is this online resource that I found. It goes by like the timeline essentially from like the start, from like what we know so far all the way to the end. And I also have the art history book. So two resources, two YouTube resources, and then 2 resources from like text. Anyway, so I'm mainly just gonna be going over what I found like cool or informative or fun, not really the overall, you know, history of of prehistoric art, which is pretty dense. There's a lot of like, you could spend your whole life just learning about prehistoric art, and I want to go through all of art history. Look at that dude rolling. Look how big he is. I want to go over kind of like what I found interesting, and maybe like a starting point for you guys to look further into if you wanted, while also kind of showcasing things that you know that I was doing in this time period, because I'm pretty sure you guys aren't gonna watch this until you're way older. But that's fine. So to kind of start it, let's go with the 4 basic types of Stone Age or prehistoric arts. There's the petroglyphs, which includes cupules, rock carvings, and engravings. So cuples are like these little indents in the wall, in sort of like carvings and engravings. Cuples just makes it like a little bit more 3D looking. The engravings is like the African pebble art where they like do cross hatchings on it and whatnot. They also have pictographs, which are pictorial imagery, ideomorphs, ideograms, and symbols. These are essentially like cave paintings, things that they put on the wall. Sometimes it's just, sometimes it's like an animal, you know. Sometimes it's like a hand. Sometimes, like as we get closer to the not Neolithic, what is that called? No, it is Neolithic. As we get closer to like the Neolithic era, they get a little bit more abstract. I mean, they are pretty abstract to begin with, but they get even more abstract. Like they start doing. What do you got, Amaya? Oh, you got your breakfast? Mmm. You you got your Nutella sandwich, and you get a Nutella sandwich and one of these blueberries. Blueberries. Typical Amaya sandwich. Hold up. Boing. So, where was I? Oh yeah, pictographs. So those are pictographs, and then there's prehistoric sculptures, which are like the Venus figurines. They're not. We just call them Venus figurines, but they're not really actually, you know, figurines of Venus. That's something that was created way later. They had, we don't know what name they had for them. They were just like really thick women. Um, they look somewhat fertile, but that also could just be us, you know, putting our current symbolism in these things. We don't know what they were for. I think that they used them to like jerk it to these these rocks. You know, we don't know. We don't know the mind of a prehistoric man. They also had ivory carvings, and they had relief sculptures. Relief sculptures were, I so I don't know who named these, but come on, relief. But relief sculptures are actually sculptures that depict things that they liked, like, that they needed essentially. Like there's a fish. They have a lot of fish relief sculptures. Uh, what else do they have? Like a bunch of animals. I think they were mainly fish though, from what I saw, from when I like Googled it. And then after that, after prehistoric sculptures, they had megalithic art. So this is like way later on, and these are like consist of like Stonehenge, the the Göbekli Tepe monuments, mother trucking, the Easter Island heads, like those megalithic type sculpture, like massive, absolutely massive sculptures. We don't really, well, I mean, everyone has their idea of how these were made or how these were created, how the rocks and whatnot were sculpted slash moved, but I'm still under the camp of we fully don't understand um how these structures were made. I was thinking that at some point, what if let's say hypothetically, theoretically, that ancient civilizations were so ancient and that they produced some type of material that started off lightweight as a, let's say, I don't know, like maybe when it was like wet or how it interacted, that it started off as lightweight, and then as time progresses that it starts gaining weight somehow. Listen, I don't know how that would work, but it would make sense of like how they were able to move slash sculpt some of these rocks, and they could have done some kind of you know synthesis to the point where these rocks started off as lightweight material, and then slowly maybe it absorbed the minerals below it to fully function, or to fully create the monument. I don't know. I don't know. But since there's no written documentation for prehistoric art from like Paleolithic era and Mesolithic, we kind of have to rely on sophisticated dating techniques, which are, these are the other things that I found interesting. So, right, like this is how we know, like, oh, we classify this as Paleolithic, we classify this as Mesolithic because it was in this time period, it was in this time period. But we use radiometric testing, which is like a scientific method to date rocks and minerals by measuring isotopes. They're usually like, hey, the baby. Here's Zoxus going crazy. That's not even in the video. That's him right now. So we use carbon, lead, argon, potassium, things like that. There's another version of radiometric testing where we only use uranium and thorium. We call it uranium and thorium dating. It's like the radioactive. They measure the radioactive decay, similar to radiometric testing. The tests performed are on the layer of the rocks and like the debris on the rocks. So sometimes they have to like kind of scrape the rocks either around or actually on the pictorials, the pictographs, or the sculptures, whatever the case is. And they also analyze like how deep it was found and like the surrounding minerals around it. They also do analysis on like the style, because they assume like it's up to you to do further research on whether you believe how accurate these analysis on the style of the markings and engravings are. But that's also how they do time analysis on like the relief sculptures, the figurines, the African pebbles, engravings and whatnot. They do analysis on the style, saying like, all right, this is the earliest we found. This is that means that this can be no later than this date because of these certain types of etchings and engravings, like cross hatching and whatnot. So the start of art is mainly attributed to the early man of the Paleolithic period, where they were like hunters and gatherers. So a lot of their art is actually consist of tools and early cave paintings and sculptures. And really the earliest art form will have to have been like the stone tools, where they utilized like hand axes to not only to like cut animal meat, animal fat, to also cut trees, to make their tents. So they, because they're nomadic, they had to move. They made tents to cut the the bones, right? They made hand axes. They made big axes, like big rock axes, that were just like a little bit sharper than the bone. But they were the first artistic creation, which was like the stone tools. It feeds into our culture. The culture aspect is really brought on by both Professor Neil and Travis Lee Clark, that where they go over that this is part of our human species, as our human species culture. The stone tools were essentially like the first artistic creation, because it allowed us to hunt and increase our brain capacity with the nutrients that we ate. It helped us take away the need to kind of chew certain things for bones. We could cut them up, chop them up. It allowed us to be easier to eating these harder to eat things, essentially. So there are 4 types of tools, like from varying strength and degree. They had the pebble tools, the bifacial tools, the flake tools, and the blade tools. Those are all pretty cool. You guys should look those up. So the earliest sculptures that were found during the end of the Lower Paleolithic are the Venus of Vercat Ram, found in the Golan Heights, Venus of Tantan, found in Africa and Morocco. These items essentially started or signified like the start of the middle of the Paleolithic era, and the middle of the Paleolithic era gave way to like cuples and cross hatching, which are like the form of engravings. So cuples were found in France at La Fraise. The Blombos caves produced one of the earliest abstract cross hatchings in Africa. And the Diplok eggshell carries the tradition of cross hatching and expands upon it in Africa also. Now we get closer to the I'm just gonna be running through these now, but we get closer to the Upper Paleolithic, which introduces the fine art, which is like what you would mainly think of when you think of prehistoric art. So these are like cave paintings, sculpting, jewelry, drawings, body modifications, kind of like what was left over on the bone, and early tribal dances that they passed on, so part of human culture. Tribal dances and musical instruments, these kind of gave way to really an expansion of the human mind other than just from straight nutrients. So there is the three most abundant art forms that we found during the Upper Paleolithic era were the cave paintings and the rock engravings, which were like, what we normally see and what we still keep finding to this day, and also the figurines, which are like the Venus figurines. And after that, we get to the end of the Paleolithic era, where we find more tribes forming. So as tribes form, we kind of start seeing that rituals and ceremonies and quasi religions start to form. So the more tribes kind of come together, the more structure they need, and not only do they need structure, but they need some kind of bonding from what I've kind of noticed. So that's kind of like where I assume rituals and ceremonies would come from. But it could also explain why so many of our cave paintings in the later end of the Paleolithic kind of had hunting scenes and like abstract representations of like animals and natures and gods. And like you find this in Australia, Africa, in Europe. A lot of these like tribalistic kind of just scenes that are being depicted, and I assume it's part of like this is what everyone else assumes is part of a ritual or ceremony, and could have been a bonding experience. It could have been like a way for them to get their younger generations to kind of form a connection to the older generation and teach them of like happenings of like how dangerous certain situations are, or maybe like why it's important to do these things, why it's important to hunt, and that it puts a lot of importance because when you think about like hunting back in the day, it's super dangerous, and I'm sure they saw a lot of people die, and they had my do caveman's dream of wooden sheep. Do they have depression? And I mean, it would explain how they would combat the fear of wanting to hunt, and that would be to kind of make it a bigger thing than it was. I mean, hunting in itself was important, and hunting was like it fed a lot of people. It's how they survive. But at the same time, it's harder. It could be harder to overcome the fear of death when you see like your friends, your family, your older generations dying, and now they're relying on you to hunt. So this could be how they kind of combated that. But so we also in the end of the Paleolithic is where we see a lot of the Venus figurines kind of evolving. A lot of them were stopped being created in stone. Some were carved out from like ivory, from like tusk. A lot were being formed by clay, so they started using mud and water, clay to make clay. And then some of them dried out in the sun. Some put them in the fire. They started sculpting out of limonite stones and volcanic rocks. They're getting a lot more intricate at the end of the Paleolithic, which creates the relief sculptures, which is like a combination of cave paintings and stone carvings. So it's kind of like a little bit jutted out, like a 3D version of cave paintings and stone carvings. It's on the wall. They made it out of like fish, other animals, kind of like a lot of things that they needed to survive, like food-ish type things. And during this time, a lot of the durability, like I said, increased when they were going from, stone, stone to obsidian. They started using, finer edges. They started making spears and arrows, getting really creative with what they were making to hunt and to kind of help their life. And at the end of the Paleolithic to the start of the Mesolithic, this is what we considered kind of the transitory period. So I was stating that at the end of the Paleolithic, which would be the start of the Mesolithic, this is when we start getting the warmer temperatures. So a lot of their natural pathways that they took before kind of were getting destroyed. So they had to kind of consolidate their efforts and go from more hunters and gatherers to more of like gatherers and farmers, and introduce animal husbandry. And this was happening all over Europe, all over Asia, all over South America, North America, happening everywhere. It kind of a period where, like I said, climate dictated that everyone should start forming into tribes, just because they couldn't take their paths anymore. And then from the Mesolithic was a pretty short period, just because it goes straight into the Neolithic. They considered the Mesolithic kind of, like I said, a transitory period where the individualistic nature of the hunter-gatherers kind of had to die out, and they had to join groups. But in the Neolithic era, which is like a massive undertaking, it's a massive part of history. It's where they start forming written language. They start forming like I said, quasi religions. Their tribes become bigger, so they start having city states essentially. I mean, they didn't call them city states, but they were just little places where instead of tents, they started making houses. So they started making houses. This is where we start getting into the Near East Asian history. That's what I'm gonna be researching next. It's gonna be all of like, basically, I feel like it's gonna be all of the Neolithic and end of Neolithic, and how this would be essentially where like Göbekli Tepe is from. So in this period they started going over a lot of the ornaments of the households. They started putting decorations on their household. This is a type of art that they were making, rather than what they were doing prior. So they're now that they have a home, they have a stationary home. They wanted to kind of decorate and make their home more homey, and more beautiful, as I would say. This is where we start seeing jade art coming out of China. There's ceramic pottery where they start doing intricate designs on them. We start slowly seeing trade happening, not in the Neolithic, but I mean, I have to do further research on what exactly the Neolithic, how long the Neolithic era lasts, but I would consider most of the prehistory of things with written history as part of like the longer era of the Neolithic era. This is where we start seeing like bigger landscape paintings from people. They would put them on buildings. It's funny, dude. Start putting them on buildings. They start making murals. They start making a lot of metallurgy. So they start doing bronze and other precious metals. They start appearing in art. They start making like I had a nosebleed. They start making in Mesopotamia, China, India, Eastern Mediterranean. They start incorporating a lot of their bronze and iron and silver, gold. The first form of writing, like I said, was created, which led way to like the first laws and the foundations of religions. A lot more pictorial representations, which is like the written form of their art, is created. Like so, like they took it away from like the walls and put it on like a smaller slab and stated like, yeah, this is like they named it cuneiforms and hieroglyphs. And like, all right, this picture represents this. If we're gonna do trade, all right, this video is about to end. But when we do like trading, this is what it consists of, because they had to like find ways to trust each other, right? So they would put like, yeah, this caravan had 10 barleys, so they would write like 10 drawings of barleys, and if there was no like 10 barleys there, then they knew like, yeah, like what happened. They would need to figure out like, oh, did they lose it because of bandits, or did they steal it? Did they drink all the wine? Whatever the case was. But this is where we start seeing a lot of those megalithic pieces of art kind of start taking shape also in the Neolithic period. This is like the tombs. We start seeing like, things such as Stonehenge. We start seeing like pyramids. We start seeing bigger houses. It starts just going into ancient civilization and what more they did in those eras, and we start getting into the Bronze Age, like I stated, and the Iron Age, and each of these regions kind of had their own thing. So that's gonna be a lot of research. So I'll continue that, but right now I'm kind of like, as you see in this video, I've been reading a lot about philosophy. So I'm trying to read more into philosophy, because I do think that it's gonna start connecting of like how the philosophy I would consider is how the bulk of the majority in that time period could have been thinking, and it could reflect on their art. And there's not much philosophy right now in the part of art history that I'm trying to find, but I did want to get like get a kickstart on doing that, just because of how long and dry some of these philosophy books are. Maybe like I'll start getting used to reading them. But I want to somehow connect philosophy, art, it's Alexis, and history, and kind of just join them, because those are the things I find interesting, and those are the things that I want to like showcase to you guys, and while also showing like what were we doing back like how to music. I was trying to keep a straight face. But all right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.